A generous waitress covered the cost of an elderly man's coffee, unaware that he was actually a billionaire searching for his future spouse. The downtown cafe was alive with the morning rush, rain tapping against broad windows and turning the city outside into a watercolor blur. The inviting smell of fresh coffee mixed with the damp scent of rain-soaked streets, offering comfort to those escaping the dreary weather. As cups clinked and conversations hummed, the door swung open, letting in a burst of cold air. A man in his 50s entered, his worn coat dripping and his battered shoes marking the shiny floor. His hair, streaked with gray, stuck to his forehead, and his tired eyes hinted at a difficult life. He approached the counter with uncertainty, scanning the menu before meeting the gaze of the young barista. In a hushed voice, he asked for a plain black coffee. As the barista rang up the order, the man searched his pockets, his anxiety growing as he realized his wallet was missing. His face drained of color as he spoke, embarrassment clear in his tone. I'm sorry, he stammered. I must have forgotten my wallet. Would it be all right if I just sat here until the rain stops? The barista, a young man with a sharp jaw and sharper words, crossed his arms and sneered. Listen, buddy, he said loudly, drawing glances from nearby tables. This isn't a shelter. We don't give out handouts. If you can't pay, you can't stay. The man blushed deeply and looked away, murmuring, I wasn't asking for a free drink, just a dry place for a moment. Laughter erupted from a nearby table of well-dressed patrons. Imagine that, one mocked, coming in with nothing and expecting service. Another added, some people have no shame. Times must be tough if beggars want to be coffee experts. The man's shoulders slumped under the weight of humiliation as he turned to leave. Across the room, Emma, a 29-year-old waitress with auburn hair in a loose ponytail, watched the scene unfold. Her hazel eyes, usually warm, now flashed with anger, balancing a tray of dirty dishes. She made her way to the counter. She set the tray down and pulled a $5 bill from her uniform pocket, placing it on the counter. That's enough, she said firmly, her voice cutting through the whispers. The barista's smirk faded. Emma, what are you doing? You don't have to pay for him. He can't just expect freebies. Emma's gaze swept the room, unwavering. I'm paying for his coffee, she said, not out of pity, but because I know what it's like to be judged for not having enough. A derisive laugh sounded from the corner. How noble, a man jeered. Maybe you're hoping for a tip from him later. Emma faced the room, her voice strong. Kindness isn't a transaction. Compassion doesn't diminish us, but belittling others shows true smallness. Silence fell, the earlier mockery replaced by reflection. Emma turned to man and smiled gently. Please have a seat. I'll bring your coffee soon. Don't let others' harsh words define your worth. He met her eyes, tears glistening, and nodded, finding a seat by the window as the rain continued to fall. As Emma prepared his coffee, the cafe's mood shifted. Patrons avoided her gaze, their earlier amusement replaced by quiet thoughtfulness. In that moment, Emma, despite her modest means and the scorn of others, stood as a symbol of dignity and empathy, and the man, dismissed by those around him, found comfort in being seen and valued. The memory lingered with Emma as she finished her shift. No one spoke to her directly afterward, but the stares, whispers, and silence hung heavy in the air. The next morning, her manager Brian called her into his office, which smelled of burnt coffee and bleach. Close the door, he said. Emma complied. Brian crossed his arms. This is a business, not a charity. You don't get to decide who gets freebies. If you want to play Mother Teresa, do it off the clock. I paid for it, she replied calmly. That's not the point, he snapped. You embarrassed your co-worker and made customers uncomfortable. Emma met his gaze. No, he embarrassed himself. Don't test me, Brian said sharply. You're here to serve, not to lecture. A pause. Can I go? She asked. Get out and remember your place. In the kitchen, Marcy and Josh stood by the sink, falling silent as she entered. As Emma passed, Marcy muttered, Must be nice acting noble when you still split rent with your sister. Josh laughed, but she thought the guy was a secret millionaire. Emma said nothing. She grabbed her coat, signed out, and stepped into the drizzle. Outside, the air smelled of wet pavement and city smoke. She didn't hurry. The apartment she shared with Lily was cramped, with peeling paint and a drafty window. Lily lay curled on the couch, shivering under a blanket. "Hey," Emma whispered, brushing her sister's forehead. "You're late," Lily murmured. Emma smiled, got caught in the rain. She reheated old porridge, added a pinch of salt, and handed it to her sister. Then she checked her wallet. $3, one subway token, and a faded photo of their mother. She gazed at the money, folded it carefully, and tucked it back into her wallet. She felt no regret, not for the coffee, not for anything. After Lily fell asleep, Emma sat by the window, watching the rain trace patterns down the glass. Her own reflection stared back at her, tired, pale, but with a quiet resilience still shining through. Her mind wandered to years before she must have been 15 when their mother had collapsed at a street market. Most people walked by without stopping, except for one. An elderly woman in a patched skirt had knelt beside them, offering water and draping a shawl around Emma's shoulders. Emma never learned her name, but she never forgot her kindness. That moment became a vow. So, when she saw the man in the cafe soaked, ashamed and invisible, she didn't hesitate. She simply did what was right. The judgment of others didn't matter. She did, that night. Before turning out the light, she whispered to the darkness, just for herself, "I'd rather be ridiculed for doing what's right than praised for staying silent." And in that tiny apartment, with nothing left but her own dignity, Emma felt something rare peace. For days had passed since the incident, for long shifts filled with half-heard whispers and lingering stares. Emma had grown used to being unseen, but now she was noticed for something she never sought, and the attention felt heavier than any silence. That morning, the cafe buzzed as usual, cups clinking, steam hissing, idle chatter. Emma moved from table to table, wiping crumbs, stacking plates, offering polite smiles. Then the bell above the door rang. She didn't look up at first, but something in the air changed. Curiosity nudged her to glance over. A tall man entered, dressed in a charcoal suit and silk scarf, his salt and pepper hair neatly styled, polished shoes tapping softly on the floor. He looked like he belonged in a skyscraper, not this humble cafe. But there was something unmistakable in his eyes. Emma froze. He didn't approach the counter. Instead, he went straight to the table by the window, the same seat where the drenched, humiliated man had once sat, and took a seat without a word. Emma clutched the cleaning cloth in her hand. Her heart raced. She approached with a menu, uncertain whether to pretend nothing had happened or to acknowledge the truth. Before she could speak, he looked up. "I'm not here to order." She paused. "I just have one question," he said. "Why did you help me?" Emma hesitated. I couldn't just stand by and watch." "You didn't know me. You had nothing to gain." She paused, searching for words. "You didn't look like someone asking for charity. You looked like someone being made to feel small. And I know what that feels like." She sat across from him, setting the menu aside. "When I was 17, my mom collapsed in a market. No one helped. They just walked around her, like she was an inconvenience. Except for one woman, an old lady, who had almost nothing. She stayed, and I promised myself I'd be like her if I ever had the chance." He listened quietly, never interrupting. "That day," Emma said softly, "I remembered that promise." After a moment, he asked, "Do you read?" Emma blinked. "Books." He nodded. "I used to. Not much lately. I like stories about ordinary people doing brave things." He smiled gently. Good taste. They began talking about books, cities, music, Bach, Chopin, about why people become cruel when they feel powerless. He mentioned authors Emma hadn't read, and she didn't pretend otherwise. She responded with genuine curiosity, not false knowledge. Minutes slipped by, then more. The cafe's noise faded into the background. At one point, Emma truly laughed for the first time in days. "You're not what I expected," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" She shrugged. Someone who wanted to say thank you and then disappear. He glanced down, then met her eyes again. "I've been wealthy for a long time," he said. "But very few people have made me feel human again. That day you did." Emma didn't reply. She didn't need to. In that moment, they were just two people, not a waitress and a billionaire, not a stranger and a savior. Just two souls finally seen. And neither would ever forget. Exactly 1 week after their second meeting, Emma received an envelope. There was no return address, no sender's name, just a heavy ivory card embossed with gold lettering and the unmistakable logo of the Ainsley, a 5-star hotel in the heart of the city, known more for hosting dignitaries and waitresses from small cafes. Her name was printed clearly at the top, Emma L. Bennett, guest of Charles H. Evelyn. She stared at the envelope for a long while, the afternoon sun glinting off the golden seal as if daring her to reveal its secret. She almost decided not to go, but curiosity mixed with nervous anticipation brought her to the hotel lobby 3 days later, dressed in her only decent blouse, borrowing shoes from her roommate, and pinning back her hair with shaking hands. Crossing through the revolving doors felt like stepping into a different universe. The marble floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled overhead, and people moved with an effortless confidence. At the front desk, her voice wavered as she introduced herself. Emma Bennett, I believe I have an appointment. The concierge, unfazed, directed her to a private lounge on the 21st floor. Mr. Everlin will be with you shortly. Mr. Everlin. She rode the elevator in silence, heart pounding. The lounge was serene and luxurious, with deep leather chairs, gentle jazz playing softly, and windows overlooking the city like a palace in the clouds. She stood by the glass, feeling out of place, until the door opened behind her. She turned. Charles entered, not the man from the cafe, nor the one she'd seen days ago. This Charles wore his presence like a tailored suit. 2 assistants hovered briefly at the door before leaving him alone with her. He entered with a calm authority that needed no announcement. Emma, he greeted, his voice smooth and low. Thank you for coming. She tried to smile, but her voice faltered. This is a long way from a coffee shop. He motioned toward a table by the window, already set with tea, fruit, and a fresh espresso. Please, he said, have a seat. She sat, uncertain whether she was being honored or scrutinized. He sat across from her, hands folded. I wanted to speak to you in person, he began, because anything less would feel insincere. She waited. My name is Charles H. Evelyn. I'm the founder of Evelyn Holdings. We operate in 12 countries, focusing on infrastructure and social impact investment. Emma blinked, speechless. I wasn't pretending to be someone else, he added quickly. But that morning in the cafe, I dressed down intentionally. I left my wallet at home on purpose. I needed to see what people would do when there was nothing to gain. Emma stared at her tea, searching for answers. My wife died 15 years ago, he continued, voice softer now. Cancer. It was sudden. We never had children. After she passed, I stopped trusting people. I stopped believing in genuine kindness. So I started traveling incognito, visiting cities and towns, not just to see the world, but to see if there were still people with heart. He looked her in the eye. That day I found someone. Emma's throat tightened. She wasn't sure if she felt honored or unsettled. So you set me up? She asked, her voice trembling. No, he said gently. I didn't approach you. I didn't ask for anything. I just watched. And you made a choice. She shook her head slowly. I don't know if I should feel grateful or manipulated. He nodded. I understand. I really do. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping softly. So what now? She asked. You tell me I passed your morality test. And then what? You write me a check? Offer me a job? A car? Charles remained calm. I offer you nothing unless you want to hear me out. Emma's breath was unsteady, emotion swirling, shock, offense, curiosity, awe. He stood and moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I wasn't testing you, Emma, he said again. I was searching for something I thought the world had lost. And maybe for someone to remind me what it feels like to be seen. Not as a billionaire, not as a burden, just as a man. She watched him quietly. I don't want to buy your gratitude, he added, but I'd like to know, would you have coffee with me again? No expectations, no pretense. Emma looked at him, not at the suit, the luxury, or the view, but at his eyes. The same eyes that once looked down, shamed and vulnerable, in a battered coat. The man before her was the same man from the cafe, and that meant more than anything. She exhaled slowly. "I don't know what this is," she said softly, "or what you hope it could become, but I know who I am." Charles turned, something unspoken in his gaze. "And who is that?" he asked. She smiled, small, honest, and real. Someone who didn't do it for attention, and someone who is afraid to walk away if that's all this turns out to be. He smiled back, understanding. That's what makes you different. And for the first time, Emma realized this wasn't a test. It was an invitation not to riches, but to something far rarer. Being seen, and being remembered for who you choose to be when no one is watching. Emma didn't expect to hear from Charles again. She thought their last conversation at the hotel was the end of something strange and dreamlike, a glimpse into a world she'd never truly enter. But the very next afternoon, another envelope arrived. No gold seal this time, just her name written carefully. Inside was a short note, penned in the same steady hand. "Emma, I'm traveling to Montreal next week. I go every year. It's quieter there, peaceful. I'd like you to come. Not for business, not for formality. Just companionship, just conversation. No strings attached. Simply a genuine invitation. Charles." Inside the envelope was a round-trip train ticket. Emma held it for a long time, turning it over in her hands. That evening, in the cramped kitchen of their tiny apartment, Emma watched rice simmering on the stove while her younger sister, Lily, sat bundled on the couch, coughing softly between sips of tea. "You're quiet," Lily remarked. Emma managed a faint smile. "That's not like me, is it?" Lily tilted her head. "Are you thinking about him?" Emma nodded, then told Lily everything about the invitation, the ticket, and the feeling that a door had opened, one she'd never dared approach before. "I'm not sure I belong in his world," Emma admitted. "What if I embarrass myself? What if it changes how I see myself, or how he sees me?" Lily considered this, then said something Emma would never forget. "You've spent your whole life making room for others. Maybe it's time you see what it's like when someone makes space for you." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the rain against the window, the distant hum of city buses, and the steady tick of the old wall clock. She thought of the cafe, the laughter and judgment she'd faced. She thought of Charles, his eyes humble and searching. She remembered her mother's advice. Don't wait for life to find you. Sometimes you have to go looking for it. By sunrise, her mind was made up. She packed lightly. A single bag, a worn journal, 2 changes of clothes, and the book she'd meant to finish for months. She left Lily a note on the fridge with grocery money and a long, lingering hug. At the train station, Emma stood on the platform, her heart caught between hesitation and hope. When the train arrived and the doors slid open, she stepped forward not into luxury or fantasy, but into the unknown. Charles was waiting in the cabin. No security, no spectacle. Just Charles by the window, a book in his lap, and 2 coffees on the table. He looked up and smiled, not the practiced smile of a man used to being served, but something genuine. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. Emma sat across from him, setting her bag by her feet. "I didn't think I would either," she replied. "But I remembered the world doesn't change unless you step into it." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm not offering anything," he said. "No promises. No golden paths. I just thought, maybe it's time I stopped walking alone." Emma gazed out the window as the city faded into trees, the train's rhythm settling into her chest. She turned back to him. "Maybe," she said, "we both needed someone to remind us we're allowed to choose something different." And so, the train carried them forward 2 unlikely companions, brought together not by destiny, but by choice. Emma didn't know where the journey would lead, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't chasing escape, wealth, or fantasy. She was stepping into something real, and that, she realized, was enough. The days that followed were unlike anything Emma had known. There were no luxury hotels, yachts, or champagne brunches. Instead, she woke in quiet villages and dusty towns, in modest goose houses and community centers, riding the back of Charles's old Jeep with the windows down and the wind in her hair. He didn't live like a billionaire. They visited orphanages on the outskirts of small cities, where children ran to Charles not for gifts, but because he remembered their birthdays, favorite books, and inside jokes. They visited shelters for recovering addicts, where Charles spoke little but listened deeply. They sat on porches of half-built homes funded by his generosity, eating soup with people who had no idea the man across from them owned half the skyline. Emma watched in quiet admiration. He never announced himself or sought praise. Once, while sorting boxes at a food pantry in Vermont, she asked, "Why don't you tell people who you are?" He shrugged, "Because then they'd stop talking to me like I'm human." Everywhere they went, Emma saw the same thing. Charles searching not for gratitude, but for connection. More than once, she caught her own reflection and realized she was smiling in a way she hadn't in years. One night, in a cabin near the edge of Quebec forest, they sat on the porch as crickets sang, and the air smelled of pine. The only light was a lantern between them. Charles brewed chamomile tea, and Emma wrapped herself in a wool blanket, watching the steam rise from her cup. They hadn't spoken for a while, but the silence was comfortable, like breathing together. Finally, Charles leaned back, gazing into the darkness. "I've had people offer me everything," he said. "Company, comfort, even love." He paused, voice softer. "But I don't need someone to love me. I need someone who understands why I love the things I do. Someone who doesn't need to be dazzled, just present." Emma didn't answer right away. She let his words settle. Then she looked at him, her eyes reflecting the lantern light, and something deeper. "I don't know if I'm that person," she said honestly. "I don't know if I understand all the reasons you are who you are." She took a breath. "But I do know this. I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm with you." Charles didn't smile or look triumphant. He just looked peaceful, as if he'd heard the answer he didn't know he needed. They didn't touch hands or move closer, because what they shared wasn't about proximity, it was about recognition, about two people from different worlds finding quiet resonance in the space between their scars. Later, Emma sat by the window, writing in her journal. Her thoughts came in fragments. Quiet, found, seen. She closed a book, tucked it under her pillow, and whispered into the night, "I didn't come looking for love, but maybe I stumbled into something braver." Outside, the stars blinked above them, silent witnesses to a story still unfolding, not of fantasy or fate, but of two souls who once believed they were alone, until they weren't. 3 months. 3 months filled with peaceful mornings and leisurely talks, where listening took precedence over speaking, and the world was seen not from lofty penthouse windows, but from street-level steps and bustling community centers. Emma had transformed, but not in the way most would expect. She hadn't gained wealth. Her style remained unchanged. Her shoes were still scuffed at the edges, her journal still brimming with scribbled notes and worn pages, but her spirit had evolved. She carried herself with more confidence, spoke with calm deliberation, and no longer felt the need to justify her worth to anyone. Charles noticed the change as well. After returning from a visit to a women's shelter in Detroit, he asked to speak with her privately. They sat together on the rooftop terrace of a renovated church they were supporting, the city skyline glowing softly behind them. He handed her a simple folder, no ribbons, no fanfare. Inside were the legal papers to create a foundation bearing her name, the Emma Bennett Opportunity Fund. She looked up slowly. "I want to leave a legacy," he said, "but not in my name. I've done enough of that. I want the next girl the one waiting tables, caring for her sister, feeling invisible to know that someone saw her." Emma remained silent. "Not yet," Charles added. "You don't have to manage it. You don't even need to be involved. But it will exist because you did. Because one person chose to see someone not for what she had, but for who she was." Emma gently placed a folder on the table, her fingers resting on its edge. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Charles smiled warmly. "You don't have to say anything." But she did, taking a deep, steady breath. She spoke with quiet conviction. "I'm honored more than words can express. But if it's okay, I want to try something different." He nodded, encouraging her to continue. "I want to build something on my own. It doesn't need to carry my name or yours. I want to start from the ground up, not because I don't appreciate what you're offering, but because someone once believed in me enough to help me believe in myself. Her voice was steady. And I want to give that same belief to others, not through money, but through presence, through listening, through being there when no one else shows up. Charles was silent for a moment before smiling, not with surprise, but with the quiet, radiant pride of someone who had always known this day would come. "You already have," he said. Emma looked at him, the man who had once sat trembling in a cafe, mocked and dismissed, and who had become her mirror, her mentor, and her friend. There was no label for what they shared. Not lovers, not partners, not quite family, but something deeper, a soul recognition, a shared truth that needed no words. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "No matter what you do," he said softly, "I'll be in your corner, always." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. In that moment, nothing more needed to be said. Their story had never been about grand gestures. It was built on quiet choices, patient faith, and the courage to let each other go not out of loss, but out of trust. They sat together until the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long golden shadows over the city. They now saw not just as a place, but as a promise that kindness, once freely given, would always find its way back, and that sometimes the truest love is letting someone walk their own path, knowing they carry a piece of you with every step. The rain had returned soft and steady as the final letters were etched onto the cafe window. The first cup. Emma stood across the street, umbrella in hand, watching her vision come to life. This was not just any cafe. It was the cafe, the place where it all began, where a man once stood, soaked in a shame for forgetting his wallet, where she, a waitress with little to offer, had handed over a $5 bill and unknowingly transformed her own life. Now the space belonged to her, but more importantly, it was a place for everyone. She had rebuilt it from the ground up, painting the walls, refinishing the floors, and replacing the lights with help from volunteers, small donors, and quiet support from someone who never sought recognition. Beneath the glass logo was engraved the motto, "En one Chotio, earn kindness." Inside, the cafe radiated warmth. Soft lighting, gentle jazz music, shelves filled with books, and the gentle murmur of conversations. A chalkboard near the counter didn't list prices. Instead, it read, "Your first cup is on us. Your second, if you can, is on someone else." The piano in the corner awaited the afternoon trio. Tables bore words instead of numbers. Hope, trust, begin. Emma stood by the window, observing the flow of people. A tired nurse, a delivery driver, a mother with 2 children, a place for rest, for dignity. Then the door opened. An older man stepped inside, hunched and dripping from rain. His hands trembled as he held the door. He looked uncertain, almost apologetic. A young barista stepped forward. "Sir, this place is for customers only. If you don't have dash." Emma crossed the room before he could finish, placing a gentle hand on the barista's shoulder. "It's all right," she said, then turned to the man. "Would you like a seat by the window?" He nodded gratefully. She smiled. "And what would you like today?" "Just something warm," he murmured, "to sit for a while. It's been a long morning." Emma's voice softened. "Then let's make it longer with a little peace." She glanced at the barista. "Here, the first cup is always on us. No questions, no shame." He nodded, eyes wide. Lesson learned. As she headed to the back, something pulled at her attention. She turned to the window, and there he was, Charles, standing across the street beneath a black umbrella, his coat collar raised, his face calm, eyes warm. He didn't wave or come inside. He just watched. She met his gaze, and in that silent moment, something passed between them. Gratitude, farewell, and something else, a promise. He nodded once, then turned and disappeared into the rain. Later, at the soft opening, Emma stood beside the piano, microphone in one hand and a warm cup in the other. She looked around the cafe. Every seat was filled, the air thick with comfort. "Years ago," she began, "I paid for someone's coffee. I didn't know who he was. I just saw someone being made small, and I couldn't look away." She paused. "That cup cost me $5, but what it gave me was a new way to see the world." Some nodded. Others wiped their eyes. "I thought I was helping a man who was lost," she said. But it turns out he helped me find the version of myself I didn't know I was allowed to become. She set the cup down. This cafe isn't about selling coffee. It's about presence, about showing up when no one else does. Her voice softened further. A man once told me kindness doesn't need to be remembered. It only needs to be continued. She smiled. So that's what we're doing here. One cup at a time. And almost as an afterthought, she added, some loves don't need romance. Some lives change with nothing more than a kind gesture and the courage to mean it. The room applauded. A saxophone began to play. And somewhere in the back, a first cup was poured for someone who didn't know they needed it until they did. And so it began. Again, thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey that started with a single act of kindness and grew into something far greater than either of them ever imagined. Emma didn't need a miracle. She didn't chase wealth or titles. All she did was choose to care on a rainy morning when no one else would. And sometimes that's all it takes to change not just one life, but two. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the quiet power of compassion, don't forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. Here, we share the kind of stories that heal, uplift, and remind us what it truly means to be human. We'll see you in the next one, where another soul waits to be seen. Sa.